For more on Yellen's report, I spoke with David Dollar. He is the Senior Fellow in Foreign Policy and Global Economics at the Brookings Institute, and he was also formerly at the U.S. Treasury Economic Emissary to China. I began by asking him why people outside the U.S. or around the world should care about her testimony.
You should care very passionately, because the debate that's implicit in all this, is how quickly the U.S. economy is recovering and to what extent inflationary pressures may be starting to build up. So it's very important that Janet Yellen and the members of the Fed board get this right. Their strategy is, as they see the economy really recover, they want to gradually raise interest rates. If they get that right, it's very good for the world, because that means the U.S. economy will be getting stronger and providing demand. And so, yes, interest rates will rise, and that'll be a little bit of a problem for emerging markets. But the strength of the U.S. economy is a more important issue. So if they get it right, it's really good for the world.
David, you brought up inflation. It has been mentioned a number of times. Do you think it's a problem for you, at least?
No, I agree with Janet Yellen and the board that inflation is running at less than 2% in the United States. There seems to be a lot of slack still in the labor market, so it's really hard to see inflation taking off, and that's why they want to continue to keep monetary policy accommodative for the time being.
She did make some controversial remarks about asset bubbles, essentially saying that there were some sectors in the economy that were priced, perhaps in her mind at least, too high. What do you think about that?
Right, she was working off a Fed report. They've gotten some criticism from missing asset bubbles in the past, so I think she wanted to showcase that the Fed is doing research, and they're looking at certain markets like social media stocks, technology stocks. She mentioned junk bonds, and the Fed staff have found some evidence of froth in those markets. So I think she wanted to be clear, that they're not completely complacent. But then the other side of the message is that the other asset markets in the U.S. look pretty reasonable in terms of pricing, and of course that's the vast majority of assets in the U.S.
There was some chatter that perhaps interest rates might rise sometime in the second quarter of next year. Your thoughts?
I think the market expectation right now is third quarter of next year, but that might pull forward into second quarter of next year. Here we're talking about their key policy rate, which will affect short-term interest rates in the prime.
I guess my question is, I know the media makes a big deal out of it, but does it really matter whether it's the first quarter or second quarter or third quarter? Why does it matter so much?
I think one quarter or another quarter probably doesn't matter so much. I think whether they start now versus a year from now, that's quite important. There are hawks out there who worry that inflation will take off in the future, even though there's no evidence of it now. So there are critics saying the Fed should start raising interest rates now. I think that would be a mistake. Whether it's second quarter next year, third quarter next year, that does not seem so important.
I'll warn you in advance, I'm going to shift gears here because I'm going to pick the other half of your brain. You used to work for the World Bank. There's this thing happening in Brazil where the BRICS countries are meeting, and they've, of course, announced that they're going to have a new BRICS development bank, essentially to help fund infrastructure projects in these BRICS countries. I just want to get your thoughts whether, first of all, you think this is a good idea, and second, might this be a threat to your former employer, the World Bank?
Well, I think competition among the development banks is a good thing. Aside from World Bank, you also have Asian Development Bank and other regional banks and lots of private investment. So I don't see any problem with competition. I think the positive side of this is the BRICS nations saying they want to have a bigger role in global finance, and they want to make sure that there's adequate funding for infrastructure. I think, frankly, it's going to be hard for them to really get this off the ground as a significant institution. There are other ways they could have gone in terms of trying to promote infrastructure financing, but I'm happy in general that they're worried about the issue.
Last question, China GDP figures. We, of course, make a lot of noise about it, as does everybody else. People are watching this very closely. I guess my question to you is, how closely should we be watching the GDP figures, and what are we really looking for?
I think you should be looking at the composition. So the report was basically good news. The economy is growing at 7.5. Consumption is growing faster than investment, so consumption is becoming a more important part of the growth driver in China. That's good. But investment is still growing pretty rapidly, which is a little strange given how much excess capacity there is in real estate and manufacturing. So I think during the first half, the government blinked in a sense and they put in some stimulus to start, letting out more credit and getting more investment. So they're kind of walking a middle line, which is probably okay. I would prefer that they tone down the credit a bit and they do more on the reform side to really lock in this transition of the Chinese economy away from overinvestment toward more consumption.